Now, you guys did something, in creating this book, and you've created momentum. And you, in your TED Talk, you talk about Alaska being the first state in 2020 to basically implement this voting system. So, I guess is your thought that in 2022 we're going to begin to see the real outcomes of that, and so we could see in Alaska a true independent, at least from in terms of the representatives that are going DC. Is it also state representative? Could you see really a whole new political orientation forming in Alaska?
So let's talk about that. Could I go over quickly what it is that Alaska passed? Meaning what it is that
please.
I recommend. Okay, so again, since we don't get results because of party primaries, and we don't get accountability because no new competitors can get in, and that's because of plurality voting, which I won't get into in detail in the moment. Those are the two things we have to change. So what we propose in our book, and then I'll get to Alaska because this is what they just did, is something called Final Five voting. So it says, hey, all those rules about how we vote, they are not in this pocket constitution. They're just made up. And they really, oh, yeah, fantastic. Okay, you got the declaration in yours too. Oh, wait, I got the declaration in mine. Okay, and they're just made up. They don't work. Clearly, they don't work. So they belong to us, and we can change them. And this is what we should change to. It's something that we call Final Five voting. It's supposed to make us think of healthy competition, like the Final Four, NCAA tournament.
I like that. Final Four.
Yeah, I don't know. If I say NCAA too much, maybe they're going to call me and say, we can't call Final Five voting that, but nonetheless. Okay, so Final Five voting, it's two things. First, let's just get rid of these broken party primaries. And instead, we'll have one unified primary, so just one ballot. All the candidates run on that, and you go in and vote, pick your favorite candidate, and then the top 5 finishers will go on to the general election. So now we're not just sending one Democrat and one Republican. We're going to send 5 ideally really talented people, the top 5 finishers. In a super, let's say, red district, maybe you're sending 3 different Republicans. Maybe there's a Trump Republican, a never Trump Republican, a libertarian sort of Republican. Okay, meaning we got competition because we're not all the same. We don't fit into 2 buckets, that's for sure. Okay, so now you have 5 go to the general election, and between the primary and the general, you now have a diverse, sort of dynamic competition of ideas. There could be someone who's really running on some of the issues you talked about, like raising some of these concerns about China. Right now, when we have the Democrats run on this, the Republicans run on this, we never even really learn anything in our elections anymore, right? Okay, so now we have 5 running, fabulous competition. And then in the general election, we're gonna do one other thing that's different. Now, when we as voters go to the polls, we get to say, out of these 5, I like them in this order. As in, you just fill in little circles, here's this name, my first choice. I totally want this person to win. And then, yeah, that one would be pretty good. All the way down to my 5th choice, my last choice, over my dead body. Do I want this person to be president? I fill in that little bubble. And
everybody would say Trump today, right? No, half the people would say.
Okay, so, and then the polls close, and we count, the computer counts, all the first place votes. And if one of those 5 has over 50%, great, election's over, that person wins.
So when you say over 50%, over 50% of the first place votes, right?
The first place votes, because let me give a sideline for a moment. Now that we're going to have such great competition, meaning we're finally going to have these new competitors that say, hey, current, incumbents, you're not getting the job done, choose me instead. Now that we're going to have that, what we can't do is have 5, and then if they split the vote equally, let someone win with like 21% of the vote. That wouldn't be helpful, right?
In the book, you guys, was it Pennsylvania that you used as an example where the governor would win with 38% of the vote? I can't remember what state you were talking about, but you'd use this example for a state. and basically year over year they would get, or each election cycle they would get less than 50% of the vote, but they got most votes, so they win.
Right. I think it was probably Maine that you're talking about, although I can't remember the exact percentages. But again, I'll say something about plurality voting. So when we, created the country, there weren't examples of good ways to vote because there weren't other democracies. So our founders copied from countryside elections in Britain. And that was this idea of, okay, here's what we'll do. The person with the most votes wins. And now, yeah, most votes. Now that seems totally logical and fair and democratic, except it turns out it's this huge problem because what it means, like what you're just getting at, if you have 3 candidates, then someone can win with, let's say, 34%, and each of the other 2 got 33. So the person who wins with 34% is only appealing to 1/3 of the electorate and is only answering to 1/3 of the electorate and doesn't sort of have the freedom or the incentive to solve problems for everybody. And it's because of this that we only ever see Democrats and Republicans, because whenever somebody new wants to come in, they're told, oh, no, don't you dare run. You'll just spoil the election. And again, I think I read that you're a bit of a libertarian. So this spoiler problem, if we go back to the 2016 election, the presidential, and I don't focus on presidential, but I use this example. You may remember, Gary Johnson was running as the libertarian, but voters on generally the right, libertarians, were told, you might like him, but even though this is a democracy, don't you dare actually vote for the guy, because all he's going to do is take votes away from Trump.
Yeah, because he's not going to win, because he's not going to win. You're going to have a Republican or a Democrat, so then it's just wasting your vote.
Yeah, it's a spoiler. That made he was a spoiler. So we never get any new people running because the best they can do is spoil the election for the candidate they're most like. And that's the real way that Democrats and Republicans keep being the only 2, even when, people are dissatisfied. So back to our solution now. Now we have top 5 primaries. We go into the general. Now we finally have 5. And none of them should spoil the race for anybody else. And you shouldn't waste your vote by picking the one you like. So you rank them. We count the first choices. If someone has a true majority, over 50%, they win. If they don't, you have instant runoffs. Totally great competition, which is to say, okay, there's 5. Nobody won yet. Nobody's over the finish line yet. Drop the person who's in last place. And any voter who had selected that candidate who's now been kicked out of the race because they lost, now that voter's vote transfers to their next choice who's still in the race.
Got it. So all the people that we got rid of,
yep,
because the 5th candidate goes away, the one that got the least amount of number 1 votes, they go away. So on those ballots, those people ostensibly chose a number 2 candidate. Their votes transfer now to the number 2 candidate. So do those look like in our runoff? Do those look like that candidate just got a bunch more number 1 votes? Is that the way we should think about it?
Effectively, yes. Because let's think of it this way. This really helps people. It's just like runoffs, but instead of having to physically keep coming back, you cast all your votes at once. So how it would work if it was physical is you would show up in the general election and you would choose in the 5. And then they would count the votes and they would say, oh, we don't have a winner yet. Nobody has over 50%. We're kicking out the last person. Come back next week and choose among these 4. And then we go, oh, we don't have a winner yet. We're kicking out the person who came in 4th place. Come back next week and choose among
the mechanism that you use is the accumulation of first place votes. And those accumulation of first place votes come by transferring whoever they voted for in the next order up as their first place vote. So say we get rid of the first round, nobody wins, you get rid of number 5, their number 2 goes to number 1, say it's the number 2 candidate. Now we still don't have, we get rid of the number 4 candidate, their number 2 goes to, and then we finally get one that has now over 50%. So it's, as soon as you get over 50% of the number one votes, you win. And you never have to go back and do this because you've already made your choices at the first ballot. So we don't have to do the Georgia runoff. It happens on election day. We know who wins, and we elect somebody that more than 50% of the people are happy with, which I think is a great.
Yeah, more than 50, it has these great outcomes. First of all, more than 50% of the people are happy, which means that, I mean, they're not maybe as happy as if they could have gotten their first choice, but now they had 5 people to choose from, and most of them will get one of their top choices. That's how it would get to over 50%. And then now the key is, because again, it's not about our reforms are not about changing who gets elected. It's about changing what the winners are incented to do. Sometimes it might change who, but as long as it changes what they do, I'm agnostic, which is to say now whoever is elected that way goes to Washington, D.C., and their boss is the general election voters. Their boss is not the party. Their boss is not party leadership. Their boss is not Nancy Pelosi. Their boss is not Mitch McConnell. Their boss is not Barack Obama. It's not Trump. It is their voters. And it's their general election voters, not that small number of people who participate in the primaries. Now, the people who participate in the primaries still choose those first 5, and then they vote again in the general. They're not disenfranchised in any way, but now every vote matters. And most importantly, when they're there, now these representatives and senators, when they want to solve a problem, they now know that they won't automatically lose.
Because they went over across the aisle. So, well, I mean, say they're Republican or Democrat or maybe Libertarian, but they won't lose because their party basically punishes them because they tried to solve a problem.
Right, but that their party or the primary voters, who could turn out and just say, "Oh, you did that compromise thing, you're out."